very warm welcome to one and all who is present here virtually to the 8th edition of the Eastern Himalayan Naturenomics Forum. As part of the very important objective this year to create the Naturenomics agenda on ecology is economy, our forum this year is honored to host the very first Meghalaya Eastern Himalayan Naturenomics Forum. And I sincerely thank and welcome all our distinguished panelists for being a part of this conversation today. While the focus in this panel is to explore the ethnobotanical approach in exploring the floral diversity of the West Garo Hills and how the region, which is so rich in biodiversity, is preserving these indigenous knowledge and creating awareness and opportunities for the local and forest range communities. But before we move forward to discuss about the West Garo Hills, we have with us today Sri Swapnil Tembe, who is the Deputy Commissioner and District Magistrate, East Garo Hills District, who would set the context for today's panel and help us understand the Garo Hills, its rich natural resources, the forest cover, and the abundant resources the Garo Hills have. We welcome you, sir, and maybe now request you to give us an insight on the Garo Hills.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So we'll start. My name is Swapnil. I'm Deputy Commissioner of East Garo Hills, although I think this particular study or this thing is more focused on West Garo Hills, but essentially Garo Hills is more or less the same terrain, and East-West has a lot of overlapping. So just to brief everyone about Garo Hills, it's mostly undiscovered and unconnected kind of terrain because of militancy. Whenever people talk of Meghalaya, it's always Shillong and Cherrapunji and those Khasi Hills area. But Garo Hills, mostly there is zero tourism, and but then it's equally beautiful, I suppose. And just because of connectivity issues and all that, we have not been able to tap the potential. But for the 2 years, it has been peaceful. So I'm hopeful that after COVID will open up. So with regard to the terrain and the ecology of Garo Hills is mostly around, let's say, hilly terrain, and 70 to 80% is covered with forest. When we say that, it's a good sign that around 80% of the entire Garo Hills is under forest, but it is under severe jhum cultivation, which I'll come to later. So the essential problem is that this entire forest area is community owned. That in Meghalaya, it's a 6th schedule area, and the entire land belongs to the communities. So the forest department only have, let's say, 2 to 3% of the entire forest area. So that's very small portion, and the remaining is in the entire hands of the community, which is essentially head by the local village headman. So in every village there will be a headman. In Garo he's called Nokma, and he has the control over all the land, including the forest and all that. So that is why it becomes difficult to ensure all these acts and preservation of forest, because now what is happening is, because of lack of livelihood opportunities, they are going for jhum cultivation. Jhum cultivation per se, we can debate about it. When the population was small, so it didn't matter much, but and it was in a way it is a little scientific also, because the soil here is lacking in potash, so they used to burn and slash and then grow vegetables there, so it made sense. But then now with growing population, it is becoming very harmful to the environment. But then since they have no other alternative livelihood, that is what they are doing. And with regard to Garo Hills, another point to be noted is that the students which are there in school right now, they are the first generation. So the remaining, all their parents and all the elderlies, they have never been to, they are all illiterate. So it becomes even more challenging to convince them about this whole, livelihood approach. And because of that, we are seeing the impact. The last 70 years, more or less, Garo Hills has been untouched with all these people coming and talking about ecology and stuff. So that has not happened. So because of that, a lot of jhum cultivation has already taken place, although now we do have some projects which are looking into giving them some alternate employment so that there is less of this Jhum cultivation. Already the soil erosion is happening to a great extent, and unfortunately, Nagaland also has the same issue with the loose soil. So Garo Hills also faces a lot of landslide issues because of that, because they are just cutting the trees and under this Jhum cultivation. In fact, it's a little better off Khasi Hills. I don't know how many of you have been there. So if we travel to this Khasi Hills, especially West Khasi Hills, you will see plain areas and grasslands, which they call Scotland of the East and all. But essentially, there was forest once there. So the problem, it's not it looks good to take photos and all that, but essentially it represents barren land where the trees were there, which some people now they don't agree to that fact. But if you read the history and all that, of course they were also part of the forest and which have been cut off. So if the same thing, if nothing is done, Garo Hills will also become like that. So because of that, now Khasi Hills does not have a topsoil. They cannot grow any vegetables, they cannot grow any other crop, etc. So the same problem will happen here. So that is why I felt very relevant that this is being discussed on this forum, because Garo Hills represents an opportunity where you can, if you can check this kind of a thing, then we can dream of sustainable living here, which is not possible elsewhere. Well, already it's too much degraded, and too many this limestone mining and stuff is happening. So Garo Hill still has that chance. So we are working, and there are few projects are going on. On this, I just want to mention one development because the topic is also ecology and economy. So what has happened is because of the lack of livelihood opportunities earlier, there were some people who came to Garo Hills and they just communicated that rubber will grow well here because it has the same tropical kind of subtropical kind of climate, same as, let's say, Kerala. It's very similar to that of Kerala. It gets a little hot, so they started growing rubber. But then to get new lands, they did the slash and burn cultivation, Jhum cultivation, and then they deployed rubber. So then rubber, when it lost its power of this, when they were not getting the right price for it, then they went for areca nut. So if you now come to Garo Hills, if it has, essentially you will see huge plantations of areca nut, which basically means that if you go into a little detail, the root system is very small of this areca nut plant. So it is resulting in a lot of soil erosion, and which is not really good. But then there is no other alternative now. Every other household is going for this areca nut plantation. We are trying to stop that and provide some kind of other plantations which are good for the soil and other things. But so that is the current scenario. So rubber and basically this areca nut plantations are increasing and decreasing the forest cover. So even though when I say 80% is forest cover, that is all small canopy. There is not big trees are not there anymore. Essentially, it's a sal forest, small trees, not very big. So essentially, that also is under threat. And because the forest does not have control, as I said, only 3% of the land, so it becomes even more challenging. So another fact is that Garo Hills, essentially, we have 5 districts here: north, south, east, west, and southwest. And the total population of Garo Hills will be around maybe 12 lakhs. So, and the population density is very less, like 90 people per square kilometer. But even in this less population density and with less population, they have started, the water stress has started in villages, which is very, very surprising, because in such thick forest and with so much of rain, Meghalaya has the highest rainfall, and this year all records have been broken, but more than, I think, 3000 of rainfall. But then again, because they don't store it, it goes the entire flow to Bangladesh. That's another issue. But we are facing in dry season water issues. So this is very surprising. One of the reasons being deforestation, clearly, because the topsoil is gone, the water does not stay, it does not recharge groundwater, and all these things are happening. So in this regard, what Government of India had a campaign called Jal Shakti Abhiyan, and fortunately, East Garo Hills was the only district which was selected in Meghalaya. So last year we have done a lot of work. We have made a lot of check dams. We have made boulder dams. We have made plantations, afforestation. So this year, in some of the villages where we have done this thing, the water is still there in the ring wells. So we are planning to take other villages, and slowly, maybe in a 2-3 year approach, that issues will be solved. So, and another project called CLLMP, which is community-led landscape management project. So it is very interesting to note that there's funding. This is a EAP, externally aided project by World Bank. So what we are doing in this is that we are giving the funds to the community, and the community is deciding what they will do to save the ecology in their respective villages. So it's a very innovative model, and a few villages have been selected. Like for in my district, there are 30 villages, and they have been given untied funds to the tune of 30 lakhs. They will get, and they can decide anything. So some of the villages have made big, huge check dams, water reservoirs, protection walls. They have done afforestation, etc., etc., and it's still an ongoing project till 2023. So this is something where we are trying to create a balance. But having said that, just to conclude this introductory part, that all these are small solutions where we are taking care of. Perhaps for now, it will save for another 10-15 years. But the answer is giving them alternatives. Because if there are no livelihood alternatives, it is very difficult to, because the forest personnel, the numbers are very small, the police, the numbers are very small, so it's very difficult to catch all the illegal timber trade which goes on, or all other kind of this forest deforestation and all that. So the only way is that we provide them with livelihood. So one of the components of CLAMP is to educate these villagers and give them some kind of skill training. But as I said, that since they are mostly unskilled and the mostly illiterate, these children are going to school now, their parents have never gone, so it's very difficult to first of all explain all this, and then again to give them some kind of a livelihood, because all they have known is some kind of cash crop, or some kind of easy to do things, because as I said, it's a hilly terrain, so there's no cultivation as such like paddy and etc. So the only thing possible are these cash crops. So that is what is destroying the ecology. So as rightly is the topic of the discussion of the panel, ecology and economy. So I think we need to innovate some kind of ways. One thing is that we are coming up with something called there is an organization called Global Himalayan Expedition. So they have a concept of tourism sustainable villages. So that is something what we are exploring in Garo Hills, because it's a new area, and unfortunately now because of COVID, all those plans have been postponed. But the idea is that yes, people are exploring. They want new destinations to go, and Garo Hills is entirely unexplored. So we will be coming up with these sustainable tourism villages where people can come, and rural tourism, essentially the concept is same, and so that people can get livelihood also, and then we can balance the ecology. Because if there is no ecology, I mean, if there is no, all these things are there in Garo Hills, there won't be any incoming. So people will realize that link once they explore. Because one of the factors why people have not discovered this is that there are no tourists here. So they don't see tourism and sustainable tourism, rural tourism, as a livelihood. If that develops, I think the strain on the environment will come down, as there won't be any cash crops or all these compulsive needs to do all these things, which is degrading the environment. So this is just a small overview of Garo Hills. Essentially, all the 5 districts are mostly the same, except North Garo Hills, which is more plain. Other districts are all hilly, and all the same terrain is same. So that was a brief about Garo Hills. I think I'll stop here, and if there are any questions, I can answer. Otherwise, I think the panel can go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir, for the informative speech. I think Meghalaya has become your home, and you are definitely enjoying your work. and this is very much known from all the initiatives that you have taken, especially the flagship program that is just STAR, and how it is improving the decimal literacy in that area. So our best wishes for all your initiatives, sir, and thanks a lot for joining this forum. Thank you, Karishma, for the introduction. Now, let me welcome all of you to this platform of Meghalaya Eastern Himalaya Naturonomics Forum and give a brief about our today's session. So the topic for today is ethnobotanical approach in exploring the floral diversity of West Garo Hills. We are all well aware about the importance of ethnobotany because it is not just the medicinal uses, but also the culture of the indigenous communities, and every indigenous community have gold with them, and this gold is nothing but the knowledge of ethnobotany that they have with them. So it is high time that we need to think of some ways to preserve these ethnomedicinally important plant species. But it is also seen that the knowledge of ethnobotany is not much popular among the younger generation, as it is restricted to a particular age group only. So we need to break this barrier by creating awareness among the communities, to develop some protocols for cultivation, for standardization. We also need to encourage the local communities to help the region grow as a potential medical biodiversity, and also to boost up the global tourism in terms of research and studies. And finally, we need to identify the pathways to catalyze the new paradigm of growth, that is ecology is economy, by working with the indigenous communities and by creating sustainable livelihood, and also to build a resilient economy that in turn will turn into creating a healthy relationship between the people and the nature. So keeping this in mind, let me introduce all of you to our panelists today. We have Professor C.P. Suresh, who is the head in the Department of Horticulture, Nehu, Tura campus. He is specialized in fruits and orchard management, post-harvest technology, and established a laboratory with a research farm of Department of Pomology in Uttar Banga Krishi Vishwavidyalaya, Kuch Bihar. He has done extensive research on some fruits like banana, papaya, pineapple, etc., and has guided a number of PhD scholars. He is not only well known for his innovative ideas on orchard farming, but he successfully established many orchards and guided one of his progressive farmers in receiving a national award. With a publication of around 78 research papers, 3 books, 32 book chapters, he was also awarded Senior Scientist 2018 by Quebecus, UBKV, and West Bengal. We have with us Dr. Binu Matthew, who is an assistant professor at the Department of Rural Development and Agricultural Production, NEMU. His various aspects of research includes conservation of citrus, diversity of jackfruit, ethnomedicinal plants used by the Garo tribe. He has also published many research papers, 3 book chapters for both national and international publisher. He also authored a book in situ rain harvesting and conservation, published from Germany. He is also involved in many projects under Department of Biotechnology, Government of India, and has a number of PhD research scholars too. And finally, we have with us Dr. Naldarin Marak, who is currently working as an assistant teacher at Dadangri Puri Government Higher Secondary School. She is an expert in biodiversity, forest ecology, and ethnobotany, and has a number of publications in national and international journals. She has also reviewed a paper for the Springer Nature Journal for agroforestry systems. So welcome everyone to this forum. It is indeed a pleasure having all of you here today. So my first question is to Dr. Binu Matthew. Sir, we already know the importance of ethnobotany and its medicinal uses. And I also spoke about the age barrier that we have in this. So, being associated with the Department of Rural Development, what are the works that you are doing to create awareness about it among the younger generation? And do you think you are successful in it?
Well, very good afternoon to all the panelists and Mr. Swapnil, the Deputy Commissioner of East Garo Hills. So I have started my ethnobotanical, my first PhD scholar here, who worked on the ethnobotanical plants, important plants of Garo Hills in particular. Actually, the work was done with a mind too. So there was a baseline study wherein we have different plant that is being used. And in the course of work, I have understood that more focused study can be done so that we can come out with some enterprise wherein the youngsters can be involved. Medicinal practice not quite available, and most of the rural people, they depend on the OJHAs, that is the traditional healthcare practitioners. In our research study, we were using THPs, the traditional health traditional. What are the treatments they are doing to handle, and what are the plants they are trying to they are using it. So all these studies we try to do it. And what happened is in the course of study, very, very interesting results we got. We say about, some always have a mindset that, okay, it is only in the rural area. Actually, now when we studied, around 50 THPs were interviewed, and we found that out of that, in the West Garo Hills, particularly in the West Garo Hills, 21 of them are active in the urban area. So that proved that even the people, those who are living in the towns, they have also a lot of faith in this traditional healthcare practices. And again, we found that around 270 plants are being used as medicinal plants by the local THPs. And as you were mentioning about the opportunities or how we can develop awareness with the youth, what I found that all these information are just with the old people, those old OJHAs, those who are working there in the rural area as well as even in urban areas. But when we interviewed with them, we found that neither their children or their nephew, niece, hardly there are very few youngsters were interested to carry on with this knowledge. So the reason was that because of the white collar job in the and in the hospitals, wherein people are like the doctors, they move around in a beautiful hospitals. So maybe the OJHA concept itself is taken like a rural or primitive. So then we thought that, okay, we'll study about the benefit cost ratio, whether it is beneficial, whether they're making profit, because many youngsters are there, either they do not have opportunity to study, or maybe college dropouts or school dropouts. So when this knowledge, when we understand that it is profitable, naturally people will come in. So when we found that, when we interviewed with them about the economics part of it, we found that when they are spending 1 rupee, they are getting 1.2 to 2.6 rupees. That means almost 200% profit. Some of the THPs they are making. So if this is so, and I'm very sure that if these things this awareness is generated among the rural or among the youths, definitely they'll be interested. They feel it is just a matter of like some old people just crushing some roots or leaves and giving it to the people, and they get treated. Some they get treated, some they do not. So that kind of attitude has to be changed among the youths. And another problem was that these are ethnomedicinal knowledge which is never documented. Nowhere it is documented. So that's why we tried that each of these, whatever they do, we will document it and bring out as a thesis. So what we did is stepwise procedure. Not only the number of plants that they are using, what are the plants they're using, the stepwise procedure of each medicine has been documented. And this documented material will be available in the public domain very soon. And once it is available, at least we can be sure that even if the next generation are not interested in medicines, at least the knowledge will be alive. And in due course of time, when the youngsters are aware about its utility, definitely they will have some place to find the information. So this is just a small study that I have done in the recent past.
Thank you so much, sir. Now let me come to Professor Suresh. Sir, you belong to the horticulture department. So tell us how your department or how horticulture per se is working for the development in the rural sector, and can horticulture be a source of revenue generation for the local people? I ask you this because you succeeded in guiding a farmer that further led him to receive a national award. So, sir, what after the award? Because we have a lot to do. Over to you, sir.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Yes, sir.
First, I thank all the organizers for organizing such a wonderful program. I appreciate the speech of Mr. Sapnil ji and Dr. Binu Matthew. Just a wonderful speech they have given already. And my question for that, it's a time to answer. See, we are working, the department started in Negu for since 2013. We are working on some of the very important issues. As Dr. Samnil ji actually touched the problems in horticulture also something, like the people here, how they are cultivating, whether it is correct or wrong, about the hill horticulture and all, he touched something. Actually, what we are working now presently is just to convey the people, those who are having the horticultural traditional practices, just to explain them some good agricultural practices. That means the gap, what is the gap in it? What's the technical knowledge they want? That we are disseminating by conducting so many training programs to them. Then the very importance of the water conservation in the hill horticulture. Actually, as Mr. Swapnil said, rightly said, there is no water stored in the hills actually in the rainy time, especially in this time also, so much of rain and all the water lost, and when in the dry period, there is a shortage in these places. For that, actually, we developed a program, a small demonstration plot like that, how to conserve the water in a hill, like planting so much of very high density planting, like for example, banana, even lychee, citrus, and other pineapple and other vegetables inside in very close planting, making for the perennial plants a pit of at least 2 into 2 feet depth of pits, so that when the rain comes, the water can go inside the soil. Later, for a time, for a month or two, from the natural springs, the water, it can stagger the water harvest. Actually, definitely it's going to come from the hills, the water out as a spring at the end of after maybe 15 days or 20 days like that. So that in a single day, it's not going to run off. It will be go down to a depth of almost 15, 20 feet. And in the downside, it's coming as a stream. That stream we can store for later use. Suppose, for example, if you make a small reservoir down in every hills, we can pump the water later in the shortage time. That's why you can say the rain is up to September, October, November, December, January, February, March. These 6 months we are having water problem. Up to December it won't be much. Then after December, actually all the crops will starve without water. That's why in every hills the water what is going inside can be collected in the lower portion of the hills in a form of a small reservoir of 20 into 30 feet depth, means 10 feet depth and 30 feet breadth and 30 feet length. That much is enough to give the water for the rest of 3 to 4 months for the perennial crops. Some of the crops what we are really very successful in these hills, what we found is banana can definitely give a good revenue, and we can try lychee. It actually, though it's you will get a revenue in the only in the month of May, as you can't stagger the crop for a long time, but still it's one of a good crop. We can go for tapioca. We can go for lemons. Lemon now it's such a very important crop in the pandemic time. The lemon performs very nicely. All type of lemons we can go. Even you can go all type of citral species we can go, which is commercially lemon now it's very popular. We can go for Mosambis. These are the crops we can introduce so that we can stop gradually the June cultivation. When you go for a perennial crop, the people, those who are going for the June cultivation can come out of it, because they will be having a perennial fruit crop, they will not destroy it. Because as it is all forest crops, they are destroying and again going for the crops. That's why June they are doing it, that you know very well. Then the question what you raised about the successful farmer that I want to speak few lines about him. He is a person who is taking the borders of Meghalaya along with the borders of Assam for banana cultivation. Mostly the Malbog bananas and the Gene bananas he is taking, along with some of the Chinni Chamba varieties. And the farmer, what I'm telling, actually his name is Debrata. He belongs originally from the border of the Assam only, but his cultivation is totally in Meghalaya. He has taken the forest land of 100 acres, and first he started with 30 acres, now with 100 acres banana cultivation. And he has made his own marketing channel, means not making any middleman inside. He's just exploited the place where the crops can be sold. And he made the school dropouts almost 30 to 40 in that area to go with him or work in the farm, and ultimately a contract farming he developed. Myself only given technical knowledge to him because they are not applying some of the technical knowledge in cultivating the horticulture crops. Like one of the things is they don't know how to grow the crops. One wrong practice they do is they cut a lot of banana leaves. One of the very important point in banana cultivation is the green leaves are very important. The green leaves can only produce food in a very short period of 9 to 10 months to a crop of almost 40 to 60 kilos. Some of the banana bunches can go up to 40 kilos. Even myself took 60 kilos in Bengal. In Meghalaya, you can simply take 30 kilos minimum. 30 kilos, if you are getting a crop within a period of 9 to 10 or 12 months, that is really amazing. And the people here having wrong practice of cuts, because the problem here is some technical intervention is needed, the dissemination of some technical knowledge is needed, some good agricultural or horticulture practices have to be disseminated to the farmers. This is only necessary. In the initial stage of the Department of Horticulture in Navu, we are concentrating on that part, giving a technical knowledge by arranging some trainings, by visiting the field and giving some tips for them. Once they follow those things, they are coming as a successful farmer. This person was actually by visual absorption by the director of the National Research Center of Banana from Trichy. A full team came and seen his farm. They appreciated and they selected his farm for the national award. In 2018, he got the national award. He was brought to Trichy, Tamil Nadu, and the central minister is given the national award.
Thank you so much for taking all the effort to join us today. We would definitely like to continue it, but we have another speaker with us. So I would like to ask my third question to Dr. Naldarin Marak. If my question to you is, you are young and you have already pursued a PhD on the medicinal plants. So what are your personal views on the marketing of these, ethno-medicinal important plant species? And don't you think that if these medicinal plants are marketed, northeastern India could have a different stand at an international platform?
Thank you, madam, for a very good afternoon to everyone. And first of all, I would like to thank this Balipara Foundation for giving me this platform. And regarding your question, like the rich biodiversity of Northeast India is already under considerable threat from various anthropogenic factors, and most of the high-valued medicinal plants are already become threatened. And several high-valued medicinal plants such as like Rauwolfia serpentina, Homalomena aromatica, Polyandra hexandra, Cossus speciosus, like Cycas vaccinata, those are having high economic potential, but they have already become critically endangered. And nearly 40% of the modern medicines are derived from the natural products. And for example, like treatment for malaria, quinine is extracted from the bark of cinchona. And another example I would like to cite, that is Cycas vaccinata. And this is the only member of Cycas, genus Cycas, to be listed under the CITES, Appendix 1, under this Convention on International Trade of Endangered Species of Wild Flora and Fauna. and is also accorded a status of endangered back in 1997. And according to IUCN Red Data List of Threatened Species 2007, this species falls under vulnerable. So according to my perspectives, uh, medicinal plants, considering the marketing and marketing of these medicinal plants, we need to develop a large scale cultivation first. And then we can form a link between the cultivars and then the manufacturers in the form of a buyback agreement. So another example I can cite Homalomena aromatica, in which leaves and roots are used in the treatment of for the bone setting by the Garo community. So during the study, I have noticed there is an illegal trade of this particular plant, and this plant, there are 6 taxa of this plant, which is indigenous to India, and out of the 6, 2 are available in Northeast, and out of these 2 species, only 1 is of economic value, that is the Homalomena aromatica. So yes, I do hope that if we can develop a large-scale cultivation of these medicinal plants, we can have a different stand at international platform. But in northeastern states, like Sir Bino Matthew has mentioned, most of the Garo Hills part are not explored properly yet. So in the northeastern states, preferences should go for the floristic research first, not for the marketing, because major part of the floristic work is left. That needs to be complete first to know the present status of green wealth in this region. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Dr. Binu Matthew, I would like to ask you another. So you're working on a citrus species that is endemic to Garo Hills. What I would like to know is this totally a new species or a variety? And can this species be cultivated by the local farmers? And also, what do you think? I mean, if this could be what would be the market value of this citrus species? Over to you, sir.
Well, thank you for the question. Citrus indica, that's the plant that I'm working on. This was actually, it's not a new variety. It was there since time immemorial, and it was already identified by Sangai scientist Tanaka in 1895 itself. So in 1895, more than a century, this plant has got its name. So it was already identified during that time. But later on, there was no much work was done on this particular crop. One of the main reason is that this crop is endemic to this area. Initially, like in the early 80s, there was reports that it was available in Kaziranga Reserve Forest, and it was in Naga Hills also. It was available, and it is in Garo Hills. But now later on, now after in the 2016, there's a report that it is now available in Nokrek Biosphere Reserve area only. So that itself may be one of the reasons why much work is not done elsewhere in the country. So when I came to Garo Hills in 2007, so understanding that citrus, and this is one of the biodiversity hotspot, so I thought that I should work on this citrus crop. And what I found that in the market also, when we see that the productivity is much low as compared to the mainly the Maharashtra and all of the total Mandarin in the Garo Hills. Started working on this, and we found that the package of practice was not really followed. As that is, in other words, scientific cultivation is not done. That's the reason why many farmers are not able to get the optimum yield. And in the due course of time, then we found that this citrus indica, because me and my research scholars, we worked near to the Nokrek Biosphere Reserve also. There, the citrus indica, which was already there in the literature, and we found it also physically. And I developed some interest into it because it is almost in the endangered, it's almost in the verge of extinction. And me, along with my colleague, Dr. Lawley, we have worked on this and tried to find out which explant, because in tissue culture, when we do the actual explants are important, which explant is good and easy to multiply. And then later on, again, we continued with that work and tried to multiply it, and we are successfully multiplying it. We have developed the required protocol, to multiply through tissue culture. Yeah, this can grow, but then there is reports that it will flower and fruit only in the agroclimatic condition near to the Nokrek Biosphere Reserve. So, and in other places, although it grows, it doesn't flower and it doesn't bear fruit. So that's why we have now what we are doing it in our place itself, in the farm. We have a farm that there itself we are trying to grow it in different conditions so that we can find out at which condition is most responsible and most suitable for this particular citrus indica to flower as well as to fruit. That research is still ongoing. So I cannot come to a conclusion right now, but very soon we will come out with a proper result that okay, this is the condition which this plant requires, and maybe we can later on by using different chemicals also or other alternative medicines like to induce flowering and fruiting elsewhere. So what my idea behind it is that this is an endangered plant, and if we can multiply it in mass and give it to the people around, they can grow it as a homestead garden because there is a lot of medicinal value in this. Because we have seen that it is used even for like jaundice, stomach upset, snake bite, hypertension. So many ailments it is being used. And but then like I'm trying to relate this my work is with the ethnobotanical that these THPs are not actually using this one. So many medicinal properties, why it is not being used? Then we one fruit for 10 rupees. So like as you're saying, whether there is any commercial value, provided that it is promoted as a medicinal plant and some techniques so that it will wherever it is grown, or maybe in certain crop, we can promote it.
I think it is very clear. I mean, this species has got immense medicinal uses and also immense scope. So my next question is to Dr. C.P. Suresh. Sir, the lesser known medicinal plants that are used by the Garo tribe and the purposes for which they are mostly used by the locals. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, the lesser known plants, we say it's a lesser known. When you take in the horticulture point, so many plants which the country people they don't know, those crops are very popular in this northeastern region, particularly the Meghalaya and Garo Hills also. Why it is very important? Because it's a very good source of protein, vitamins, minerals, micronutrients, and also possess certain medicinal values. That is very important. But this is confined to very small tribal communities of the country. It is very essential to popularize such plant species such that their benefits may contribute to food and nutritional security, and also to combat the population pressure, plant diversity losses, and climate change. Why we have to consider these lesser known fruits for nutrition? Actually, it's having very interesting food compositions. One more thing, if I want to add, actually, these crops survived for centuries. It's contribute to resilient ecosystem also, needed for adaptation to climate change and the external shocks. And actually, this diversity, there's a huge amount of diversity of these lesser known fruits. In this area, the tribal population, the ethnic groups or the common people of this belt, using these crops as food, fodder, fuels, and medicine also. Most of the plants are fruits and leafy vegetables. Most of the plants are used for medicines also. And important is it's having a huge role in socio-economic aspects. For example, if I take a crop like key amaranth, it belongs to family Amaranthaceae. Actually, it's a very simple crop, but it's a crop very good source of antioxidants, protein, calcium, iron, and vitamins. Actually, the medicinal value is, if you see the medicinal value, it's having high dietary fiber content. It improves digestive health and reduces constipation. It reduces bad cholesterol in blood and decreases risk of cardiovascular disease. And if you take this is very common. You might have seen in Garo Hills in every market. So Diplozium fan, the family Diplotheridaceae. I think you can see from the photo what I'm showing. It's a very rich source of protein, minerals, and vitamins, good source of antioxidants. Due to the presence of glycosides, phenols, terpenoids, saponins, this is reported to be antimicrobial, anti-inflammatory, and anti-diarrheal. And it can even cure liver diseases also. It's very important. It's actually very lesser known. People don't know. Actually, if you see this crop, this is Indian pennywort family Araliaceae. It's a good source of minerals and vitamins. The juice of the plant is emetic. It is considered as depurative, febrifuge, expectorant, antifebrile, diuretic, and anti-cancerous. And it has also an antimicrobial property. This crop is very common here. We call it maybe chapatang. The scientific name is Hematocarpus validus. Very famous fruit here. We can use humus for natural color also. It belongs to family Menispermaceae. It's an evergreen perennial creeping woody climber. The fruit is highly perishable and has a short shelf life only. But it's used as medicine for blood purification. Means those who are having kidney disorders can use this crop. It's a medicinal uses for jaundice, anemia, itching. It's very rich in iron also. You can see the nutrition, this thing, vitamin C, 13.5, beta-carotene. These are all very potassium, high potassium. And if you see the crop, it's very beautiful crop. And if you see the plant, even studies are saying the vine can be lengthy for 1 kilometer. Can't believe. This vine can grow up to a length of 1 kilometer. Such a type of crop. Lesser known. Many people in other parts of the country, they don't know. Then these crops and all, you know, this is carambola. You know, many people know that it's very rich in vitamin. This is Myrica estulanda, Myrica rubra. This is a very good vitamin C crop. It is antiseptic, astringent. You can use against bronchitis, lung infections, for toothache. It is a natural antioxidant. Still, it is a very lesser known crop. In the whole country, many people, they don't know. Many horticulture, they don't know. This all you know. Citrus jambiri. It is also a very important crop. We can grow even in tropical regions also. This is bale that you know. And the emblem of this is actually amla. It is also high vitamin C crop. This is Pyrus fascia, Prunus nephalis, Phyllanthus acidus. It is also one of the very lesser known crop. Bacuria sapida. Elaginus latifolia. This is actually very less in, it's not very less in Garo Hills, but so much available in Khasi Hills. It is very rich in fatty acids and it's an anti-carcinogenic effect it's having. Such a wonderful crop. Till now, people are not exploring the richness of medicinal values about these crops. Anyway, if I go, I'll go for many crops like Citrus medica, Citrus mactoptera, Citrus auriculata. So what I want to say here is, these all the crops are very less known to the horticulture point of view. We have to popularize it. We have to conserve it. We have to open to the horticulture fraternity or the medicinal or the therapeutic medicine side, the importance of these crops, the medicinal value of these crops. That's why you have to popularize it. That is that much I can say about the lesser crops, because so many crops are there. I won't get that much time. But my very important point is we have to popularize it and we have to conserve it and we have to actually explore the possibility of growing in other parts of country also.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. But we are popularizing. We are giving some training to some of the people around our villages also, like where Negu is situated in Thura areas. We are doing some of the. We are working on the Tapatang, Habitat Arpus validus, and some type of beverage making, wine making. And we are giving trainings to the, if you go through my slides, we are giving training to the farmers, the photos that you can see. I'll show some more photos. These are the photos. I think you can see some of the training programs we have given to the villagers around our village. There are almost 60, 70 people in a group coming, and they attended a training, and what are the products we can make from this type of crops to popularize the crop. They can make some of the beverages also with other jam jelly making for skill development trainings, like some pickling from this type of crops also. Like that, we are taking some efforts just to popularize it in Thura also. Thank you so much.
Thank
Hello?
you so much. So I think the initiative that you have taken is really good, and our best wishes to you, sir, for this for all the initiatives ahead. So my next question is to Dr. Marak. So, ma'am,
Yes, ma'am.
you have worked on the medicinal plants of the Garo Hills. So, can you please tell us whether you have succeeded in finding any endemic or rare species, and can you tell us that if whether the cultivation of these crops could lead to a sustainable development or not, ma'am, please.
Okay. Thank you, madam, for the question. Yeah. During the research, I have screened for the rare and endemic species, and I have found out 5 species are under IUCN Red List category according to the 2017. Then those are Nepenthes cassiana, that is under endangered, 2 species, that is Diospyros embryopteris and Cycas vaccinata, those are under vulnerable, and 2 species, that is Sonchus arvensis and Mirikanagi, which is called Sopi in Khasi and Bolneseng in Garo, those are under near threatened. If we can cultivate those plants, I think we can boost the economy of our region.
Okay, thank you so much, ma'am. Sir, I just want to ask a question to Dr. Binu Matthew out of my curiosity. Sir, you worked in the Spices Board under Ministry of Commerce and Industries, Government of India for around 5 years in Assam. And so, how do you see, sir, the future of the agricultural practices, organic production of different crops from your experience?
Actually, I'm born and brought up in Northeast only. I was in Arunachal Pradesh, and most of my studies up to graduation I did in the northeastern region. So this place is not new to me. It is my I feel that I'm born this place only, and this place is same. So this is actually not very something like you have asked me something very difficult. I started 7 offices simultaneously, 7 offices in all those in the conventional states like in Kerala, Karnataka, and Tamil Nadu, where most of the spices are grown, including Andhra Pradesh also. But the labor cost is very high there as compared to the northeastern states. And the agroclimatic condition in the Western Ghat that is there in Kerala as well as the western side part of the Karnataka, the agroclimatic condition is quite similar, and most of the plants are similar plants we find here also. So that's why definitely at government level also they have come out that now the promotion of all the spices for particularly the organic production is getting concentrated in the northeastern states. And I find that there is huge potential because the soil is still virgin most of the places, and still like the people, they don't use much chemicals out here, either out of ignorance or lack of money, or whatever it is good. What is happening, it is good that they're not using it. And even in Garo Hills also, what I have seen, whatever the vegetables that we get from the hills, that is quite pure. So naturally, it is healthy, tasty. So considering all these things, I find that there's huge potential in the Northeast, not only to develop spices crop, but also horticultural crops as well. Because the quality produce, because now if you have to go for international market, they go for quality and chemical free. So all these things we can easily develop in the northeast, because most of the area is still untouched by the chemical fertilizers or pesticides or herbicides, etc. Considering all these things, I find that northeast is having huge potential in growing horticulture crop as well as spices crop, and this one definitely will have a direct impact on the economy of the country.
Thank you so much, sir. That was highly informative. So I request Shri Swapnil Tembe, sir. So we request you to conclude our forum with few words, on the future of agriculture and also on the ethnobotany in the Garo Hills. Swapnil, sir.
Yeah, very informative discussion. I just want to add few things that we have been going to the villages and we find sometimes even the villagers don't know what kind of fruit is there in the village. I mean, we come across various citrus fruits, and it's surprising that even the locals from the district, they are not aware that these kind of citrus fruits are there. So I'm always surprised at this variety of this because there's a gene pool, citric gene pool is there in that Nokrek area, and otherwise also in Garo Hills. And I suppose we have been discussing it with the horticulture department also, that we must discover some kind of a use because these fruits are definitely maybe some pharmaceutical use or something must be there. So if that is discovered and that develops a demand of these fruits, that will be good for the livelihood of our local people. I just want to give one more example that a few researchers came from Switzerland last year. They read somewhere about the citric gene pool and all that, and they came all the way to Garo Hills. They were here in East Garo Hills for a week, and they studied this citrus indica and other fruits in that Nokrek region and other regions, and they found 30-40 varieties of different fruits, and they have taken samples to their country, and then they will be studying it, and perhaps they will come up with some kind of a we also told them that any pharmaceutical use can be there, that can be taken up. So more research into this has to be there, because these fruits, first of all, some of them are quite, used in the local cuisines and general for making juices or etc. But most of them are not used. So we need to discover them and we need to analyze them. I'm sure there must be some kind of a pharmaceutical significance. So I look forward to more researchers and more organizations coming to Garo Hills, more particularly to East Garo Hills, and we can take it up all these unexplored areas. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, sir. But due to paucity of time, I think we will have to conclude our forum here. So I think we had an in-depth discussion on ethnobotany of West Garo Hills, Meghalaya, where we not only came to know about so many endemic species, their medicinal importance, on creating awareness among younger generations, but we also had an idea about the lesser known plants on Garo Hills, about the fruits like lemon, lychee, tapioca, etc., on the growth of these species, and also on how to stop the Jhum cultivation, the management of these species, their harvest technology, how they can be used by the locals as a source of revenue generation, their market value, and so on. So my utmost thanks to Mr. Swapnil Tembe, who, in spite of his busy schedule, joined this session. My sincere thanks to Dr. Binu Matthew, Professor C.P. Suresh, and Dr. Naldarin Marak for sharing their experiences with us. And I'm sure that it has been a wonderful forum and was beneficial for all of us. And it would definitely help us in our future endeavors, and also to catalyze the new paradigm of growth, that is ecology is economy. Last but not the least, I thank all the participants who joined us today. Thank you so much, all of you. Stay safe.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.